Hey guys, me again, Confused Omega. Back at it again, making another Christian YouTube video. Um, Today's video, I'm going to be talking about gluttony. Yeah, so gluttony. It's a pretty rough sin, as Paul describes it in Philippians chapter 3, verse 19. You know, uh, whose end is destruction, whose God is their stomach, and glory is in their shame, who set their thoughts on earthly things, right? Paul describes gluttony as like basically you making your stomach God, right? So everybody knows what gluttony is. I don't have to explain that. Everybody knows a lot of things about everybody. Yeah, I mean everybody knows oh yeah, gluttony, that's a sin that exists. But a lot of people don't care about it, right? Because they don't want to stop eating food. Which okay, I can understand. I mean obviously you need to eat food, but you need to stop overeating because it's not good for you. It's really bad for your health. I can tell you, personal experience. It's not fun to overeat. It's not fun to wake up the next day feeling horrible, feeling, you look at yourself and you're like, dang, I'm fat, that happens, right? So gluttony is a very dangerous sin, it destroys your confidence, of course you should place your confidence in God, not your physical appearance, but if you struggle with vanity, then gluttony is probably the worst sin. Like vanity and gluttony go hand in hand. So watch out for that. But anyways, though, I wanted to talk about some strategies to beat gluttony, right? So everybody kind of knows fasting as a strategy to beat gluttony. And I would say fasting, at least for me, I think it can work for some people. But for example, for me, I've fasted, right? I've gone a couple days without eating, maybe 3. I know it's not that much, but I've gone days without eating, right? And when you fast, the issue is that it isn't super sustainable for a lot of people. And the reason why is because, well, you need to eat food so you don't become malnutrition. You don't want to be malnutritious. You can fast every couple of days. But a lot of the time though, you'll be very de-energized. You won't have energy to do a lot. Sometimes, I mean, there's been times in my life, generally speaking, at least for me, if I fast for one day, depending on what I ate, but prior to that day, I'll be fine. If I ate, a bunch of carbs, I'll have a lot of energy the next day. But if I didn't, then I'll be pretty tired. Usually with fasting, I'd say, first day, you'll feel it. Not too bad, depending on what you ate before. Second day, you'll feel it pretty bad. Third day's not great. And then fourth is meh. Fifth is yuck. Sixth is yuck. Seventh, you're kind of better. So on and so forth. So I would say fasting for gluttony at least. It can work. But for me though, when I try it, doesn't really help. Kind of hurts me more because you get super hungry, right, when you fast. And so when you break that fast, right, because it's super, I don't know, I find it really easy just to say no to food completely. But the thing is though, is that after you're done saying no to food for an entire day, you have to eat food, right? Because you don't want to fast. Because let's say because I like working out, right? So if I want to maintain my muscle, and if I want to, I don't know, gain muscle, or just in general, just have a nice workout, I would want to eat food. So sometimes, you want to, fast for a day or two, break the fast so you can work out, right? So for me, for instance, like after I do that, I'm super hungry. And then you eat a lot because you're super hungry. And that can lead to gluttony very easily. I think fasting, well, yes, it can be a tool to combat gluttony, can also lead to it because, like, you'll just have a super strong desire to eat food and then you'll feel super hungry like the next couple of days. And eventually you just mess up and, eat too much, right? And yeah, so fasting, I think fasting can work, but it also can be dangerous. So just to let you know. Of course, there's also some people who can't fast because they have medical reasons or whatnot, or they shouldn't fast because, like, they need the nutrients and stuff. And in general, it's not really fun to fast either. Um, Spiritually, you'll grow a lot from it, but physically, if you have a very active lifestyle, like me sometimes, most days, then you're not gonna have a fun time. Not gonna have a fun time. So fasting, it's sustainable somewhat, but it's not gonna be long term. You can't just fast forever. You know, you'll die eventually, right? I mean, you're gonna die anyways, but that's besides the point. I think y'all get my point, right? Anyways, though, I would say fasting. I say though, a better way to beat gluttony is to a better way to beat gluttony is to just change your perspective on food. So in society, and this at least in America, I don't know about other countries. I'm not gonna speak on that. In America, we're kind of known for being super gluttonous, right? Kind of known for super unhealthy foods that are processed and whatnot. But the underlying reason why America is like that is because of America's perspective on food, which is that it's Americans, you and maybe if you're an American watching this, you as well, right? The culture in America, or at least in the West, I don't know. Well, I don't know about maybe Canada and Mexico also have this problem. I'm not too sure. Is that we view food as pleasure. Okay, and that's a big issue. We view food as something to enjoy, as something pleasurable. I'm not saying that food is not supposed to be enjoyed and liked. Obviously, God made food to be enjoyed, but the issue is that a lot of the time that over you could say over focus on the pleasure you get from food sometimes outweighs the nutrition and the most important thing about food, which is giving your body nutrition, which is making sure that your body is healthy and has enough energy to get through the day. So if you're viewing food as this pleasurable thing, right? Then what are you going to do? You're going to pick foods that are unhealthy and you're going to eat a lot of it. And then what? You're going to be sad and miserable because you're, eating too much and you're sinning, right? You're hurting God. Not hurt. I mean, you say, I guess, hurting God's feelings or whatever, right? Because you're sinning, right? You're breaking your covenant. Well, yeah, you're damaging your relationship with God, I'll say, right? So if you view food as pleasure, right? You view food, though, as just something to give your body energy and something nutritious, and you give glory to God for the wonderful taste of the food instead of the food itself giving it glory. Then what? What are you going to do? You're going to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to eat this food, get the nutrients I need. You're going to pick healthier foods because you can get more nutrients. And then the pleasure you get the food, you're gonna attribute it to God rather than the food itself, which then would make you want to get your enjoyment and your happiness from God rather than the food. So you'll be able to be gluttony that way, right? Just changing your happiness and your dopamine and where you feel loved and where you get your sense of enjoyment, right? Get your sense of enjoyment not from food, but from God, right? Because that's also just something in general with a lot of addictions. I would say gluttony is an addiction, but it's like a lot of addictions, and I'm talking from personal experience here. At least like with gluttony, right? I struggle with gluttony, sometimes, right? Um, it's there's just a lot. It's a lot of like you just really like how the food makes you feel in the moment. Like you really like the taste. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with liking eating. There's nothing wrong with wanting a good meal and like enjoying the foods you eat. But the reason why you enjoy them shouldn't just be because of the taste, but it should also be because God is giving you this wonderful food for you to enjoy. Right? And that's how a lot of addictions are. A lot of sins. Like, for example, lust, right? With lust, you're breaking your covenant with God, kind of. Right. Yeah, because you're like, you're sinning against God because you're enjoying pleasures that God has given you for the sole purpose for the purposes of like marriage, and you're enjoying it outside of marriage, right? You're not married yet, but you're lusting, and so you're enjoying the goodness that God has planned for you inside of marriage, and you're enjoying it outside of a marriage, right? Generally speaking, that's how. And with lust, it's like the same thing with gluttony. I mean, they're a little different because with gluttony, you have to eat. Like with gluttony, you're gonna have to eat food. Whereas with lust, it's not like you have to lust, right? With gluttony, it's like you're going to have to eat food, but you just need to make sure that you're not overeating. Whereas with lust, it's like, you don't have to do it at all, right? You don't even have to. Like if the urges come, you just ignore them. Whereas if the urge comes to eat food, you probably should eat, but then you need to make sure that you just don't overeat, which is kind of it can be a hard thing to do because sometimes it can be, if you eat too fast, you can, you just gotta pace yourself, right? Yeah, but anyways, though, a lot, yeah. Well, going back to with lust, though, it's like the way you'll keep, yourself, restrained. I don't know if restrained or keep yourself pure until marriage is just by loving God, and getting your love from God rather than the sin itself. Because a lot of the times, the reason why people struggle with sin is just because, or at least with like pleasurable sins, like gluttony, greed, pride, lust. A lot of times with those sins, it's just like, I get something out of this that I'm not getting out of a relationship with God, right? The happiness you feel from the sin is outweighing your want to pursue Jesus, to live a righteous life. Right? So if you focus on just correcting yourself, and if you focus on, for example, with gluttony, like I said before, like changing your mind about food and thinking about food more as energy and nutrition and something that you can thank God for. Like if you change the enjoyment that you get from food from like saying, oh wow, this food tastes amazing, you should change your thinking from, oh wow, this food tastes amazing, to, oh wow, glory be to God for allowing me to eat this wonderful food. Because then you're putting the emphasis on God, because then he's giving you this food. So when the temptation of gluttony comes, you'll be like, I don't want to, because God gave me this, God is giving me this happiness, this enjoyment, not just the food itself. And then you'll be able to say, yeah, I'll get this happiness and enjoyment that I would get from overeating, from God, right? From, something else that God can give me. Or, like just from loving God and just being in the presence of God is enough to be happy, right? Yeah, a lot of the time that's just kind of what happens, Like a lot of times with addictions, just because there's something in your relationship with God, you feel like you're not getting something, you're not getting enjoyment or happiness, or not feeling loved, and so you just commit the addict. So you just get addicted to stuff because it makes you feel that happiness that you should be getting from a relationship with God. And the reason why you're not getting that happiness is because you're not focused on God, right? So a lot of the time and your mindset is just not on God. Like you have the wrong mindset. So when you fix your mindset, when you ask the Lord to change your mind, right? Metanoia, repentance, like change your mind, change your thinking about life, then quitting sin will become very easy. Or not easy, but it will become more understandable, more simple. So especially with like gluttony, right? But this goes for all sins though, right? But another good tip about gluttony, and this is just something that literally even worldly people know this. Make sure every time you sit down and you're about to eat a meal, mentally ask yourself how much, mentally ask yourself, what is it? Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. Forgive me. Mentally ask yourself how much of this, mentally ask yourself, how much of this do I really need to eat, right? Just ask yourself that before you start eating. Just ask yourself, okay, I'm super hungry. I'm going to eat food, but I just need to ask myself, should I? Like, how much should I eat? Should I eat all of the, let's say, for example, I don't know, let's say you're eating potatoes, Should I eat all of the potatoes or should I just have 3? Right? You should just ask yourself, how much should I eat? Right? And how much should I eat? Ask yourself that question every time before you eat. How much should I eat? And then when you're eating, always, sometimes mentally ask yourself, am I full? Am I full? Am I satisfied? If the answer is yes, put the food down. If the answer is maybe, think to yourself, am I going to eat anything else today? If no, and you know that you're like in a good calorie, like you're close to your calorie maintenance, like to maintain your weight, just say, oh, okay. Probably just put it down. But if you're not close and you're like kind of under, then you can eat a little bit more, right? But if you, but just ask yourself, like, am I full, And sometimes though you can not be full. Sometimes you can eat and you can trick yourself into thinking you're full, and then a couple hours later you're trying to go to sleep and your tummy is growling and you're like, it's kind of hard to go to sleep. Sometimes that happens. That happens a lot to me. That's really annoying. A lot of the time, but sometimes asking yourself, am I full while eating is a good thing. And also, make sure that you eat slow. too. Just eat slow. Eat slow. Um, it's just a lot about just being mindful while you're eating. I think that's something you just gotta do. Like if you want to be gluttony, just be mindful while you're eating. And like Paul said, like you know, people who struggle with gluttony, the enemies of the cross of Christ, their God is their stomach. Okay? Now, I'm not saying if you struggle with gluttony, your God is your stomach. Like, literally. But spiritually, like, yeah, that's kind of what's going on. Obviously, you have faith in Christ, and Christ is God, right? You're a true, genuine believer. True, genuine believers struggle with gluttony, right? Like, you trust God, you believe in Him. But the issue is that you have faith in Jesus, right? But the issue is that you're kind of just making yourself want to feel good, right? You want to feel good, so you're overeating, right? Or sometimes you can overeat too, just for like emotional. Like basically, you gotta make it so whatever the reason why you're overeating, because overeating is just like, yeah, just make sure when you're eating food, apply all those things I told you. But also just remember that God is not your belly. God is Jesus, right? God's Jesus. So just don't overeat, That's it's way harder to do than just saying it. But just remember, God is king. Remember, you're not trying to cut. Also, make sure you're. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I'm just not speaking well. Forgive me. I'm gonna end the video soon because I'm really tired. But I just want to end it on this. Make sure your desire for quitting gluttony and literally any other sin is because you love Jesus, not because you're worried about something. Because that's something that's I've struggled with gluttony, right? So sometimes I struggle with gluttony, and I'm like worried that I'm gonna be fat, right? Because well, it's debatable if I'm fat or not. I don't know. I don't want to get in that debate, but like if you have like I don't know, if you're like, ah, shoot, I need to quit gluttony because I don't want to be fat. I don't want to be fat and ugly. Or you're like, I don't want my wife to divorce me or something. I know that's an extreme example, right? But like, I don't want my wife to divorce me, because I'm gonna be fat, so I need to quit gluttony. Like, it won't work, It won't work. But if your desire to quit gluttony is, I want to quit gluttony because Jesus loves me and I love Jesus, and He saved me from my sin, and He's God, He's King, and I want to live a righteous life to glorify Him. If you make it focused on, this is something in just life in general. If you do something out of love for another, like if there's something that's hard to do in life, instead of doing it for yourself, sometimes it's easier to accomplish the thing and do it is if you're doing it for someone else. So, if you're struggling with gluttony, just make sure your desire to quit it is you're doing it for Jesus. But if you're truly doing it for Jesus, like if you love Jesus and you're doing it for Jesus, 100% you're going to quit it. 100,000%. Maybe not immediately, but you will. But it's difficult though. So just approach it like any other sin. Make sure you're aware of your eating habits too. Just track what you're eating. Make sure you eat healthy, because it's super easy to overconsume food if it's unhealthy. Besides, you don't want to put unhealthy food in your body. Your body is a temple of God. Don't disrespect it. Don't put in food that's actively going to harm your body. I know there's no more dietary laws, but honestly, it might be a sin to put in food that's super unhealthy, but I don't know. I'm not gonna say that I know that for a fact. But anyways, though, yeah. Thanks for watching my video. Love y'all. God bless. See you later.